Hey everybody, BJ here, back with an update on the meta snapshot. Many of you have been asking for me to get on and do this, and guys, I'm going to be honest, like, I struggled a lot for the meta snapshot. I almost didn't do it this month because, as some of you know, I took a bit of a break and just fell a bit out of touch with the meta, to be honest. It's also quite a strange meta at the minute in many respects. It's a pretty decent one in the sense that there's quite a lot of variety and there's not too much that's like particularly broken. So it's pretty decent in that sense. It's not the best meta I've played. It's not the worst. But yeah, I've pulled together some interesting decks along with a mix of the more obvious powerful ones. So you know what, guys, take this as a bit of fun. All right, it might be slightly off. Let me know in the comments as always. But this is just kind of like my take on the meta. I have, as always, spoken to some top players to get a bit of a sense. But yeah, definitely not as easy to get a grasp on right now. With that being said, let's dive on in. For those who don't know, we have 3 tiers in this meta report. Basically, these if they're in these 3 tiers, that means that any of these decks can pretty much hit legendary. Okay, so tier 3 is still good. Basically, if it's not in here, then I'm saying everything else is pretty much tier 4, or it's just not got a high enough player rate. Okay, so for example, spoiler alert, there's not any Tau in here. That doesn't mean there couldn't be a Tau deck that's like tier 3. This is not very prevalent and it's not doing great on the leaderboards right now. Okay, so with that said, let's dive on in. Okay, so first up in tier 3, I'm bringing you a little bit of spice today. First of all, I got Galaron the Pious. Now, Galaron is not great. The reason why Galaron does make it into tier 3 this week, though, is because of what is tier 1. And without wanting to spoil anything specific, let's just say that Galaron has a very good match into a certain faction that rhymes with Mastra Atiliarum. I tried. Anyway, yeah, the Galaron deck that I'm going to show you is from my teammate Slither. And he assures me it's not that great against everything else, but it's very good if you want to target Astra Militarum. So we'll have a look at that. It's quite spicy and it's quite different, so I thought it'd be a fun one to include. Then we've got Varro Tigerius representing the Ultramarines. I still think that Varro can just beat down a lot of decks and control the early game pretty well. There's lots of different ways to play Ultramarines. I think they're in a pretty nice spot at the minute. You know, they're not too OP, they're not kind of bottom of the meta, which they always seem to be one of those two things, Ultramarines, if you look at the history of the game. But right now they're somewhere middling, and all the Warlords can do something viable. So Varro, I think, is probably the best at the minute, and I'll show you a good deck from Silverblade. Then we've got Tervagon, again, continuing with the spice. I think Tervagon is a low player rate, but you'll see my recent video that I did with Shimatsu. We did a masterclass on the Tervagon, so definitely go and check that out. Tervagon, when played well, is powerful. Tervagon is one of those decks that I describe as having a very high power ceiling, so it can be very powerful, but a very high skill requirement too. So much easier to make mistakes that are clinical and critical, like you might not even know you're making a mistake. It could be that you mulliganed incorrectly, and in other decks it can be more forgiving. Tervagon's not forgiving. Like, you have to know what you're doing and you have to play it properly, but if you do, then it can be, you know, the best Tervagon player will be playing higher than tier 1. I saw what's his name, Kane. I've forgotten his name now. He's top 5 player, something Kane. He's playing Tervagon this season. So yeah, it's actually a very, very good deck. Definitely one if you want to like master the deck and you want to really invest the time. Tervagon's good. Janezara slipped a little bit. Now you could make an argument that Janezara is still bottom of tier 2. She still obviously does very well against Gym Boss decks. There are fewer Gym Boss decks this season, which is one reason she's lower. She also, I mean, obviously, one of the good things with the Aeldari is I think the Eldritch Storm does quite well against the Astra Militarum. But outside of that, like, they really struggle. They're very good at like 1-for-1 removals. Outside of the Eldritch Storm, like, you just can't deal with the constant go wides. and the armor and things like that. So they struggle a little bit into Azrael with the big beefy armored units and stuff. And yeah, so it's not the greatest meta for Jane Zar at the minute, to be honest. I've got her top of tier 3. Of course, as always, these decks can all climb to legendary, but I do think that tier 3, you then struggle to get any much higher than sort of 3k potentially, although, you know, the Tigris deck I'm going to show you is #1 on the ultramarine ladder right now. So, you know, potentially in the very best hands it can be pushed a little bit further. But my general guide is, like, my tier 3s, I think you can definitely hit legendary, potentially hit 3k. Your tier 2s, I think you can get up to sort of pushing more up to like 3-2, 3-3. And then your tier 1s are the ones that can really go beyond that. It's quite hard to go beyond that with the way that the scoring system kicks in on ladder. And so really, it's really only the tier 1 decks that extend beyond that. Alrighty, let's have a look at some examples of this then. So, we got... let's take a look first of all at this Galaron deck. Alright, so the Galaron deck, as I said before, it's not necessarily a premier ladder deck. If I can find it, here it is. This is Slither's deck that he built really for tournaments and to target Astra Militarum. It's very, very good against Astra Militarum. Some real spice in here. We've got the Vex Machinator just ultimately just destroying those Lehman Russ tanks. I mean, such a tempo swing. This card I've always really loved. And like, yeah, you find the right meta, and obviously it can be very, very powerful. Really, really nice top deck. And top curve, sorry, there. Of course, you've got things like the Hellbrew. You've got the Havocs is really good with the all the vulnerable and the double. It all just despoilers means that you just melt units with this. Now, why is it so good against Astra Militarum? Well, you know, making things invulnerable, but then having all the kind of go wide stuff, you know, bring a decay, more invulnerable. So the combination of that then with things like Spawndom and Traitor's Hate is just really good at clearing out those things. And obviously things like Havoc that just hit from hand. And you've got the Execution for anything big along with the Vex Machinator as well. So yeah, overall, really spicy deck. He's even got a single Plague Marine in there just to make use of that kind of combo with the Spawndom, right? The Spawndom comes on, kills loads of stuff, but obviously they all die, and the Plague Marine just gets a Dark Pact of Resilience for every one. Kind of wonder whether it's worth putting a Demonic Frenzy in if you're going to go with that strategy, but hey, you know, I played this deck. It's I'll listen to what Slither has come up with. And the Host of Chaos, obviously there as always, but really good in this deck because it really draws into the answers that you need. So yeah, that is, if you want to go and test out some Galaron and play something a bit spicy, and definitely, you know, hats off to Slither. This deck is definitely a bit better. Oh, I didn't even mention the Master of Possession. I don't actually know what the thing is with this. I think it's the fact that, again, it does the 2 to 4 damage. So these damage spells, obviously, with the vulnerable that this deck pumps out is obviously very powerful. It does make this card much better. And then the Possessed Marine that comes on, again, also benefits from not just doing 4 damage, but probably more because of vulnerable. So actually that does make a lot of sense in this deck. Yeah, there we go. Alright, next up we had the Ultramarine deck, and just to show you that I'm not making this up, if we go to the leaderboard and we go and check out the Ultramarines, you can see Silverblade is nearly at 3,200. That's really respectable. You can see that, right, the Tau haven't even gone past 3-1, for example, and even the Aeldari haven't got that high yet. So, hats off to Silverblade, already early in the season, doing very, very well with this deck. Let's show you guys the deck. This is it. And guys, I haven't played Ultramarines this season, so again, I bow down to Silverblade's judgment on this. He has gone for something that's kind of familiar to Silverblade's style. He likes to sort of gather the company, more infantry-based decks that are quite low to the ground. You know, this will just beat down a lot of decks that try to do fancy stuff like deep into the late game. And it can go very wide, right? The deck can go wide with obviously hitting that Codex multiple times and then Avenging Zeal just to kind of finish off. Interesting to see we've got Sergeant Gadriel in there. I always think this guy's a pretty well started unit, but he's always been a bit underwhelming in terms of his Codex. But it is Codex, so he can do it every single turn and obviously contribute to that Zeal as well. If you want to see more on this particular deck, go and check out Silverblade's videos. He has been recording his tournament games from the recent Warpforge Open, and if you go and look at his first video in that series, he talks extensively about this deck, and you can see it being played in action. Also, just a quick shout out to Silverblade. He is now streaming. I know he's got himself a new PC setup, looks really good, and he's also streaming more too. So if you want more content and you want more streamers and Warpforge content creators, definitely go and check Silver out. He's a good follow for sure. Alright, next up we had Turvig on. I'm going to show you Shumatsu's Bugdaka deck. This is one that him and I did a masterclass on just recently. Go and check out that video on my channel. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a good video because I actually made a lot of errors in there, and it kind of showed the good and the bad. We got some massive combos off as well. So it's very much a combo deck. And you really want to be making good use of the Infestation node, the Overwhelming Swarm, and the one-drop swarms, right? Because essentially you can have like almost infinite amounts of them, just making ginormous decks. I also love the fact that Tuni Prime finally finds a home in a deck. Like, this guy is a absolute beast in this deck. Like, he can just win games. Another big comboing off with infinite reduced cost one drops, right? So they're all 0 cost, and then obviously they're getting the extra buffs there, and of course High Fleet Leviathan as well. Bit of fun as well. You got the Exocrines in there. You can drop the Exocrines if you want to play things like a Neuro Lloyd or the Hormagaunts, but the Exocrines are pretty good in here as well. We do have double Predator Instincts, and of course the Encircle the Prey, so this can do its thing. And yeah, overall, it's a pretty powerful deck, but like I say, the warning on this one is very high skill ceiling. And the Eldar, I mean, do we need to see another Jane Zar deck? Here you go. I'm not going to... These things have been in the meta forever. There's different flavors. Some people don't play Urilla, they don't play the Fire Prisms, they go for the extra flankers, but... You get the picture. I think this is the last one I got from Targul, who was War Master last season, and he ran this as one of his 4, so, you know, it can be done. Yeah, pretty good Eldar deck. Alright, let's move on, guys. Next up, we go to Tier 2, and first up, we got the Neurothrope. I mean, the Neurothrope has obviously benefited massively from the balance patch. Swarmlord being demoted a little bit, and the Neurothrope getting that buff where he now has Synapse on himself, which is awesome, quite frankly. I think it's added a lot of fun and like new ways to play with the Tyranids. I've played a little bit with the Neurothrope, not as much as some of the others. Go and check out the Ecclesiarch, who released a good video on the Neurothrope. And I also had a live stream where I played quite a bit of it early on in the season, so go and check that out. But I think that Neurothrope, we haven't found the kind of, I'd say the kind of optimal build yet. People are trying lots of different things, playing around the different kind of top end and the mid-range units. So, but I mean, the fact that you can kind of obviously just buff, play the stratagems on Neurothrope and buff units is a massive, is a really, it's including his own Spirit Leech talent, of course. So just quite a nice board building type of deck now. Yeah, I think it's not tier 1. It's not tier 1, but I think it's pretty solid. I think it's pretty solid. I think it's a really good, really sort of decent mid to low tier 2 deck. You should be able to put a decent score on with Neurothrope. Ghazghkull Thraka is back. I do think Ghazghkull's new ability is really nice. Even very small things like the legendary boss for the Orc Knob, the legendary Orc Knob. Like just playing that on 6 with the hero power, like you suddenly get a 2-powered Grot that can attack, and you know, it's just tiny little incremental buffs like that. I really feel like Ghazghkull's ability is much more on point now. The fact that you can still get a Grot even though you've got stuff on the board, it makes so much more sense. And yeah, we've got, I'll show you a deck that I think is pretty good for Ghazghkull. I think he's in a pretty solid place right now. The main problem with Ghazghkull is he can sort of deal with one tier 1 deck, but then not the other. So that's his issue. In terms of building in terms of him climbing on ladder, he's probably going to have a good win rate against one and then come unstuck against the other. And then if you tweak the deck to combat that, then it'll just keep switching around between, you know, which one he's good against, which one he's weak against. But against everything else, it's pretty solid, to be honest. Of course, got all the hard removal that you need, and that 40 health as well, along with armor and whatnot, makes it pretty hard to finish off. Asmodai is in tier 2 at the minute. Again, similar thing. I think Asmodee's power level hasn't really been touched. He can go ultra secrets. We already know that has a high power ceiling but inconsistency, or he can go more down the Raven Ring route where you'll get fewer secrets but you have more sturdy kind of control, nice reactive tools to control the board. Yeah, Asmodee being, you know, the initial warlord that you get for Dark Angels as well means he's accessible, so pretty high play rate and pretty decent, in a very good spot right now. Now the Sisters of Battle are really interesting. I'd say that the Adeptus Sororitas warlords are all in a very, very even place right now. I think Junith and Erica obviously are no longer the S tier decks they were a couple of seasons ago, but actually they were pretty well balanced. I think they still have some very powerful units, right? Things like Miraculous Feat, the Rhino is even still pretty good value. The Rites of Restoration, there's still so many, the Beacon, you know, there's still so many broken cards people have forgotten, you know, just because they got some nerfs. They're still very, very powerful. I think they're a very solid tier 2. And the reason why Morven Val's in there is Morven Val actually has a very good matchup into some of the tier 1 decks. And Morven is like a pretty good, I would say she's not quite as good as the other two, generally speaking, but in this particular meta, I think Morven Val is actually a really good prey deck. I think Morven Val is a pretty good choice right now, if I'm honest. I don't love the playstyle. Maybe I need to play more Morven Val. I've not played her for a while. That might be something that I look at next. I might look at a Morven Val deck, to be honest. I think she's in a pretty good spot right now. Just the penitent stuff, the removal, the anti-horde ability that Sisters have with Flagellance and Spirit of the Martyr. I might even be tempted to run double Spirit of the Martyr in this meta. The Cleansing Flames, you know, they've got a lot of good answers to that kind of Astra Militarum and stealth and things like that. Next up we got Sylar. Now Sylar again was high tier 1 not too long ago. I do think Sylar has struggled against Sappher and struggles a little bit against the Astra Militarum since that they got buffed, but people will be adapting the decks, and I already talked about how Galaron could do that. Chaos can adapt quite well to go wide metas, so I think you probably just need to tweak it. But other than that, I mean, Sylar's still in a decent spot. It's still, you know, nothing's changed for the deck itself. I'd still put this as a high tier 2 deck and an easy 3k climb if you know what you're doing with that deck. Alright, let's take a look at some, let's take a look at some example decks. Alright, starting with a Neuro. What are we going to show for Neuro? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what the best Neuro deck is. This is one that I came up with. I think I played this early in the season. And then the one that we did on stream with Shimatsu, we were just kind of thinking out loud, so we're not saying this is the absolute best, but we came up with this. Copy of the Camouflage can actually be pretty decent when you're running big units. You can play this on Neuro himself, meaning that he can't be like targeted with Wailing Doom and stuff, and then obviously the units on the side get targeted too, meaning that they can't be, you know, targeted by hard removal spells like Execution and Retribution and things like that. So yeah, a lot of discussion on the podcast. If you've not seen our podcast, which is called Forgecast, me, Ecclesiarch and Shimatsu did quite a deep dive on Tyranids, and we talked about this top end when we were comparing like Swarm Mode with Harpy and the new Maleficent, and so go check those out. And see what you think. Like I said, we've not optimized the deck, but I think something like that is a pretty solid Neurothrope deck. Now, in terms of the Ghazghkull deck, I'm going to show you this is what I've been using in the tournament. It's a control Ghazghkull, but it's got more of a proactive angle to it. So we're not just trying to fatigue her. We can still use this deck to fatigue in the right matchup, but it's not the main play style. It's more proactive. We've gone for things like Deathcopters in there and Hornhelm Boys, and these are two units that you can play down proactive at multiple different mana drops, right? Like Hellboy you can play at 3, at 6, at 9, but also they combine well with our double Crump the Gits, and also they just add, look at the value, right? If you get into the late game, it's a 3-drop that scales really well, because we can obviously play down 3 units from that one card, same with the Deathcopter. So outside of that, it's fairly standard stuff, to be honest, except for we do run the single Stormboy strike because we are running the double Crump to Gits. So we're more around the Crump to Gits route rather than the kind of Ardus Nails and sort of Gretchen more defensive approach. And we're not running the AoE shell, which also could be good, by the way, like as an alternative if you wanted to. I've got plenty of Gaz videos, guys, go back and check them out. But if you want to see ones with Burner Boys, Spanner, right, to give you that extra AoE against AM and stuff like that, could do well. But this does really well against Astra Militarum, not so good against Azrael, but yeah, pretty decent spot at the minute. What do we got? We got Asmodai. This is my Ultra Miracle deck. This is a very all-in version of the deck, guys. Like, honestly, you could easily play less aggressive for the secrets, and then you could drop things like the Reavers, and you could put in, you know, more flankers and things like that. But this was really going like all in on the quest ability. It's a lot of fun to play if you like the idea of secrets. You're much more likely to actually tip that balance point in the game where you actually start to draw your secrets. But I mean, it dies horribly to things like Jim Boss Gordrang, and these beatdown decks will just destroy this. But if you get the time to obviously build momentum, then obviously the secrets are incredibly powerful, and this will come through for you. Now then, in terms of the Sisters, I don't really have a great Sisters deck to share, other than to say, definitely check out the Ecclesiarch's very recent video. He's just done one on Junith. I think that shows you a pretty decent version of what Sisters looks like post-patch. So go and check that out. I'm also probably going to play around with some more Vinval and see what I can come up with. Sylar has, as I say, hasn't really changed too much. This is a version where we've actually put the Bringer of Decay back in and a Traitors here. It's just to try and deal with those 3 health go wide boards a little bit more, and a Legacy of Vengeance. So this is just a little bit more tweaked to a kind of go wide opponent. Or obviously you can kind of go with the more old school. I say old school. The version that Boogie went plus 4k with, which had the double sorcerer in. So a couple of decks there for you to check out. Alright, let's look at our tier 1 then, guys. So first of all, I do think that in tier 1, I would say we have got Gordrang, Beatdown, Sappho and Azrael, and then I would say that Ursula Creed is our S tier pick this season. Now, you could argue that, and I actually haven't put it in, and I was meant to, so I do apologise. There is one thing that is missing from this, and that is Denkler. Denkler is, for me, probably high tier 2, and I'm not sure why I forgot to add Denkler in. I don't have a deck for you, but pretty much everything Ursula does, Denkler does almost as well. But Ursula does better in terms of, she doesn't run out of cards, right? Like, she can choose one of 3 spells from her power every turn, so she's more adaptable to what is needed. And some of the spells are really powerful, some of the new cards, so Ursula's really benefited from that. So apologies for missing out on Denkler, if anyone's asking tier 2. I think the new Warlord, by the way, is a very similar power level. It's just not played as much as Creed and Denkler, and that's one of the reasons why it's not on my meta, because I'm thinking about play. How much they're played as well. Right, so let's take a look. Gordrang, Sappho, Azrael, and Ursula. So let's take a look at Gordrang. I mean, it is very undeniably very powerful. It's as most of you probably know, this is not my preferred style of Orkz. It's one of my least favourite ways of playing Orkz. But I can't deny the fact that it is definitely still the most powerful in terms of consistency, and if you just want a ladder deck to win games with, then this is the way to go. You've probably seen on my channel this season, I have been playing a lot of Zagmech, which I know Slither's playing a bit now, and I think that deck is pretty solid. I think if it wasn't the fact there's no play rate, because it's a deck I created, that deck's a very good, I think, high tier 3 deck. That you can climb decent with. But if you just want the most powerful, like, consistent deck, this is probably it still with the Orkz. There's a few, obviously, tech choices. You don't have to run the Commando if you don't want. You don't have to run that. But, I mean, you know, the 96% of this deck is pretty set, you know. You could drop Commander for another attack squig if you wanted, but I like the Commander in there. Very, very good decks, kind of just able to beat your opponent down, obviously, with the proper killies and the Makaris, and you've got all the flankers and the removal, and you can armor up and heal. Yeah, just a very, very solid tier 1 deck, Gym Boss. Then we had, what did we then have? Sappher. Now, Sappher is, for me, really interesting. There are multiple Sappher decks that you can run. This is my tournament deck that I've been running, which is the Leader Uprising deck. I really like this deck. The combos that you get out of this come out quite early. But I think the one that most people are playing on ladder, which I'll share with you, is a sort of tank ramp type of deck. I'm going to show you this version. There are slightly different versions out there. What are you trying to do with this deck? You're trying to basically... we only have 3 stratagems, Perfect Ambush and Double Outriders. So that means that we can use Sapper's ability to draw stratagems and essentially just always have Outriders on 4. So you can basically play Outriders on 4, reducing the cost of all of your tanks while stunning your opponent's board, and quite frankly pretty much acting like an AoE, not just stunning it, but actually often clearing the board. It's such a good card. This is an S tier card, I realise. I just probably underrated this card a little bit. It's so powerful in Sappher. This is a really fun deck because you can play bigger things, and it acts as a ramp deck, so you know your Lehman Russers can end up only costing 8, your Goliath trucks end up costing 6 or 5, Wolf Squads 5. So what you do is you play Outriders on 4, and then you want one of your 6 drops, or at the least a Cult Sentinel, which will cost 4 next turn. Obviously, your Ridge Runners will cost 5, and your Wolf Squads will only cost 5, so you can play them straight away. And yeah, super powerful. You end up with lots of 0 to 2 cost units, which you can then combo out at the end with either the Lehman Russ or the Kellamorph as a finisher. Very, very cool deck. There's also a lovely combination in here where you can play the Jackal Specialist, that's, you know, for 3, for example. And then you can play things like the Atalan Jackal, meaning that every card after this is going to put a Sabotage in your opponent's hand, and then the Jackals do 2 damage, and then you know, if you had a truck down as well, then that attack that attacks 2 more units come out, which basically triggers 2 more of these, which triggers 2 more pings. So you see where this is going. Like, you can create basically put about 7 secrets in you. Sorry, not secrets. 7 what do we call them? Sabotage cards in your opponent's hand with this deck. So it's very, very flexible, actually. There's quite a lot of different sort of lines of play, and it's definitely not a deck I have mastered yet. I'm still not sure whether I want the Kellamorph in there or not. One thing I like about having the Kellamorph is it does count as an infantry, so it does mean that I can get away with putting the 2nd G-Stealer Familiar in there. I know Long Tim's version of the deck only had 1 Familiar, but obviously by having 2, then that means we could actually then attack with Kellamorph as well, giving him 8 range and sniper so it doesn't get hit back. That's a very, very powerful play. Alright, that is Sappher. Very, very good spot right now. Next up we got Azrael. Now, personally, I don't have the level 40 defense card yet. If I did, then I would, similar to my teammate Targul, I would probably play a 2nd Inner Circle and really turn this into a ramp deck, because things like Inner Circle, which obviously choose a card from top of your deck and then make it cost 1 less. So now, you know, a Deathwing Master could cost 8. Things like the level 40 defense card, which basically means on turn 3 that we ramp. We actually gain a crystal, which is very unique in the game, and I know Targul's running that. I don't have it yet, but even without that, this deck has still been very, very solid. I'm running a Captain instead of an Inner Circle, and I've actually got double Ravenwing Ancients in there. There's a few spots that are flexible, but most of the deck's just standard, right? You know, your Ezekiel, Deadly Hunter, Samel, Deathwing Nightmaster, such a powerful end game. Really, really powerful. Got great answers to everything there. And, you know, you're just trying to hit your early game, really. You want to hit your Rocks and your Tamans and your Captains, sorry, your Librarians and your Black Knights. And I think as long as you hit those, like, certainly if you missed the first 2 turns, that would hurt. Yeah, that's the deck. Just plays on tempo. and just has really superior units in many sense. So it's quite an easy one, relatively easy one to play. Last but not least, we have Ursula Creed, and again, guys, I honestly don't have the #1 most refined deck. This is the deck I'm currently running. I have dropped my at all costs because I think that card is good and deserves to be in here, but unfortunately there's a bug right now, which means the card's a bit broken. I think if you play Griff down first before you play at all cost, and at all cost just doesn't work. It doesn't discount the cards, and I lost the game because of it. So I've actually dropped it. If they fix the bug, then I think that card could go in here. I don't know what the exact best refined list for Creed is. I don't know if anybody does, to be honest. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think is a more refined version this is. But this is certainly very, very powerful. The new Aquilian Servo Sentry is a great unit, as is the new Armoured Lightning stratagem, right? Being able to hide that little ping damager behind this, being able to play that with this so that on 6, for example, so that these all have armour. It's just super difficult for your opponent to cheese through. And I do think that the card, the Tempest Scion, is a really powerful addition to the Astra Militarum. Being able to sometimes come on with armour, but most importantly, being able to stun the enemy is superb. And obviously we've got a single Valkyrie drop in there where you deal 3 damage. If it kills it, puts a Scion on, and then the Scion can stun a unit. So I feel like Creed is just super powerful. One of the things obviously that tips it over the edge right now is this card. It is the most broken card in Warpforge right now. I have no idea what anyone was thinking designing this card. This could cost 8. It's so good. Yeah. Quite often, if I'm playing against guard, they play this card, and I just resign. Or it's such a swing that it's just not even funny. I think without this card, I think Militarum are in a pretty good place. But this card's tipping them over the edge at the minute. So yeah, that's it, guys. That is the. Let's have a quick look. That is what my meta snapshot looks like for the 18th of March, 2025. Take it with a pinch of salt. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. What would you change? What would you add? And any amendments to deck list, please share them in the comments so that the rest of the community can benefit. That'd be great. Love you and leave you guys. See you soon.